The Nexus of Capitalist Realism, Spectres of Marx, and the End of History. Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, Is There No Alternative?, is a profound critique of contemporary capitalism, emphasizing how the pervasive nature of neoliberal ideology has limited our ability to imagine alternative political and economic systems. Fisher's analysis intersects intriguingly with Jacques Derrida's Spectres of Marx and Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man. These works collectively explore the ideological and philosophical ramifications of capitalism, the persistence of Marxist thought, and the notion of ideological finality. In capitalist realism, Fisher argues that neoliberal capitalism has become so entrenched in modern life that it is perceived as the only viable political and economic system. He introduces the concept of capitalist realism to describe this condition, where capitalism is seen as the default and insurmountable state of affairs. Fisher posits that this worldview stifles creativity and critical thinking, making it difficult for individuals to envision or pursue alternatives. Fisher's critique extends beyond mere economic analysis. He delves into the psychological and cultural impacts of capitalist realism. He asserts that neoliberal capitalism not only affects economic policies, but also permeates everyday life, influencing mental health, cultural production, and societal expectations. Fisher's notion of capitalist realism is thus a comprehensive critique of how capitalist ideology shapes contemporary experiences and limits our ability to imagine different futures. Jacques Derrida's Spectres of Marx is a seminal work that revisits Marxist theory in the context of a post-Cold War world. Derrida explores how Marxism continues to haunt contemporary politics and thought, even after the apparent collapse of socialist states and the end of the Cold War. He argues that Marxism's spectre persists, influencing political discourse and ideological debates despite its supposed obsolescence. Derrida's concept of the spectre suggests that the legacy of Marxism remains a powerful, if elusive force in shaping political and philosophical discussions. He critiques the assumption that Marxism is no longer relevant and emphasizes the need to engage with its ideas to understand current socio-political conditions. Derrida's work challenges the notion that Marxism has been entirely displaced by neoliberalism, suggesting instead that its ideas continue to influence and provoke thought. Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man presents a different perspective on the ideological landscape. Fukuyama argues that the end of the Cold War marked the culmination of ideological evolution, with liberal democracy emerging as the ultimate form of political organization. He contends that liberal democracy represents the endpoint of human political development, thus signaling the end of history. Fukuyama's thesis is grounded in the belief that liberal democracy has triumphed over other ideological systems, particularly communism. He suggests that this triumph signals a kind of ideological closure, where liberal democracy is seen as the final and superior form of political organization. This perspective aligns with the notion of a post-ideological era, where the fundamental ideological battles have been resolved. The intersection of Fisher's capitalist realism, Derrida's Spectres of Marx, and Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man reveals a complex landscape of ideological and philosophical debates about capitalism, Marxism, and political evolution. 1. Capitalist Realism and Fukuyama's End of History. Fisher's critique of capitalist realism can be seen as a direct response to Fukuyama's notion of the end of history. Fisher argues that the perceived triumph of neoliberal capitalism which aligns with Fukuyama's view of liberal democracy as the endpoint, has led to a state of ideological paralysis. According to Fisher, neoliberalism's dominance creates a scenario where alternative political and economic systems are not just difficult to envision, but seem entirely unthinkable. This sense of closure and finality in Fukuyama's work parallels Fisher's argument that capitalist realism constrains imagination and innovation, reinforcing the idea that liberal democracy and capitalism are the only viable options. 2. Derrida's spectre and Fisher's capitalist realism. Derrida's concept of the Marxist spectre provides a counterpoint to Fisher's notion of capitalist realism. While Fisher argues that capitalism has become a seemingly uncontestable reality, Derrida suggests that Marxism's ideas continue to challenge and haunt contemporary thought. Derrida's spectre implies that the ideas of Marxism are still relevant and influential despite the apparent dominance of capitalism. This suggests that capitalist realism may not be as absolute as Fisher argues. Instead, the continued presence of Marxist thought, the spectre, implies that alternative visions are still possible and can potentially disrupt the hegemonic status of capitalism. 3. Fukuyama's end of history and Derrida's spectre. Fukuyama's assertion of the end of history contrasts with Derrida's view that Marxism remains a persistent spectre. Fukuyama's thesis implies a finality in ideological evolution, suggesting that liberal democracy represents the culmination of human political development. In contrast, Derrida's work challenges this notion by highlighting that Marxism's influence endures. This tension underscores a broader debate about whether history and ideology are truly at an end, or whether ideological conflicts and influences continue to evolve. Conclusion: Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, Jacques Derrida's Spectres of Marx, and Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and The Last Man offer critical perspectives on contemporary ideology and political theory. Fisher's analysis of capitalist realism highlights the constraining effects of neoliberal capitalism on political imagination. Derrida's exploration of Marxism's enduring influence challenges the notion of ideological finality, while Fukuyama's thesis suggests a resolution to ideological conflict with liberal democracy at the forefront. Together, these works provide a multifaceted understanding of how capitalism, Marxism, and political ideologies interact and shape our perceptions of history and possibility. They collectively challenge us to reconsider the limits of ideological imagination and the potential for new political and economic alternatives. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed this latest episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe below.